What's good, family? Back with another video. Today I'm gonna be reacting. Can Black Lives Matter and law enforcement see eye to eye? Middle ground. All right. I think we can. There's nothing that we can't accomplish in this country. There's nothing that we can't do to get further. I definitely think we can. You know. But let's see what happens. Subscribe to the channel, turn post notifications, smash that like button up, and watch the video all the way through. I appreciate you. Yeah, let's get it. Let's go. Let's hop right into the video. No time wasted. Boom.
Matter was derived from Black Lives Matter to subvert Black Lives Matter, and I won't come here and sit down and say that that's okay.
So we brought law enforcement together. Okay, let's just go.
Can I have my law enforcement go to the left pool of light? Can I have my Black Lives Matter supporters go to the right pool of light?
That white girl kind of look a little cute with the hand. Look a little cute. I'm just.
I regularly fear for my life.
Okay.
You know, I'm an armed patrol officer, so I do respond to burglar alarms. So if someone breaks into someone's house, have a gun, I would have to respond to that certain situation. So I do fear for my life in a way, I guess you can say.
I do something that I think every black man, every black person in this country, many people of color have been trained to do, and that's when a law enforcement officer gets behind me and I'm driving. I'm making sure I'm signaling, I'm checking my speed, I'm thinking of all the different legitimate ways that you could stop me. And in that moment, I recognize and I realize that I'm not a scholar with a bachelor's in political science, a bachelor's in sociology, a master's in public policy. In that moment, I'm just another black man to that officer. And that scares me.
Neither one of them said anything I agree with. One side is afraid that the police are going to do something to them. The other side is afraid that something could happen to them because they're out in the line of duty. My heart goes out to officers with that. It does. It's something that we really don't discuss. Like the fear that they have being out there on the road. And a lot of officers, I've noticed, I read about this, and I don't know if this is still happening now, but I know a lot of officers really don't come from a lot of the communities that they actually end up policing. So that makes it a lot more complicated, you know, for, you know, to understand like where people are coming from in these communities. But something definitely we need to work on.
I maybe could have stepped forward. I feel scared for my life when I'm at work. Often, when you get pulled over and all the thoughts and things that are going through your mind, well, where when I pull a car over, I'm thinking about where I'm at on the highway, how I'm going to pull this vehicle over. Did I run the plate? Did it come back to that vehicle? Am I buckled in? Am I not buckled in? Because most officers are shot and killed during traffic stops. And as I approach, I put my hand on that car to leave my handprint, because if I'm shot and killed, that person is further incriminated by the evidence of my prints being on their car. But I don't feel afraid for my life as a citizen. But at work I definitely do, and that's a choice I made.
I choose not to live in fear. If the question was, do I feel less safe now than I did 5 years ago, I would say yes. And I think that that's because we have rampant social chaos that's expanding. And I think that that's playing a large role in a lot of the trends that we're seeing.
What do you mean by social chaos?
Out of wedlock birth rates, statistically, you know, that sets a child back 5 times more likely to be poor, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, and 20 times more likely to end up in prison.
I mean, the chaos that I'm seeing more recently is white men walking into schools with AR-15s and slaughtering people.
Yeah, and that is what you're seeing. And what you're not seeing is the dozens of homicides that occur in Chicago on a daily basis. And that speaks to certainly a media that's desirous to push an agenda and a narrative that factually doesn't bear out. There is a massive disparity between black crime and white crime at large. And obviously that's going to lead to accelerated interactions with law enforcement.
Or is it the criminalization of black people? When you have more police officers patrolling a concentrated area, then of course you have more stops, you have more, situations where police officers say, oh, they didn't signal, and then when I pulled them over, I pulled all occupants out of the car, I searched the car, I found this gun allegedly buried somewhere, and all of a sudden now you have a crime. As a public defender, the reputation is that, I'm going to lose most of my cases. I have won far more cases than I have lost. My name is Elisa Blair. I am African American. I'm also a criminal defense attorney. As a public defender, I've seen the mistreatment of my clients. I see the disproportionate incarceration of Black and brown people. And I see the excessive force used in arrests.
And I want you to take into consideration something else that and I respect the white guy's point. I really do. I respect it. But I want you to take into consideration something else. He completely deflected away from the conversation that was actually going on and started talking about something that has nothing to do with the conversation. It literally, it doesn't. It really doesn't. He said there's rampant social chaos. And that has to do with fatherlessness in the homes and things like that. Okay, maybe fatherlessness needs to be in the home, but what does it have to do with police officers and black people coming in contact with each other? What does that have to do with that? Like there is a dispergency. Dispergency. Wow, there is a disproportionate area here where we need to discuss how to communicate amongst each other. It's communication. There's a good book about this, Malcolm Gladwell's book, Talking to Strangers. That was a great book. It discussed we really don't understand how to interact with each other. Look what she said. She said when she goes up to a car, she has to do all these things in order to prepare her mind for what could possibly happen to her. That's something that we need to take in consideration too as blacks. And same thing with officers need to take into consideration that when you pull up to our car, we don't know how this interaction is going to go. We just don't. But the white guy completely deflected from an entirely different conversation. And I don't know. I don't know why he did that, but let's keep going.
Police should be given more resources.
Mm-hmm.
I think police should definitely be given more resources so that they have other options besides killing people. Officers should have the resources available to them to handle a situation without casualty on either side.
Yeah, I mean, as an officer, I appreciate hearing that from a member of the public and from a public defender, and can speak to it for myself and my department and what I've seen in other departments in the area, and know that we need more resources and different types of training, communication techniques to de-escalate situations, and different types of least force option techniques. But as a small woman, I also want to be able to physically protect myself, and it's a hard balance.
The largest expense for almost every municipality and county is public safety. There's plenty of money. What we don't have is enough implicit bias training. The things that we carry about ourselves that define how we interpret who we're interacting with. We don't have enough contextualizing of the communities that you're serving. Draw officers from the communities from which they serve. That way when they go back and they're policing their own community, that's deeper than just the race of the officer.
So you think that black police officers need to be trained to be more sensitive to the black community? Is that what you're saying?
No, I think black officers that are policing black communities should come from those communities. And I think a white officer who comes from that community might even be more effective than a black officer from somewhere else.
I agree, and I think that this is a great point, which is that an officer, a white officer, a black officer, a female officer, a Hispanic officer could be just as good as any other or better. And that's because there are things other than skin color. And I think that what's so concerning about this dialogue is that it is pushing us further back into black communities, white communities, when really I thought that the goal of Martin Luther King was that we were going to be moving to a society where we were being judged by the content of our character. If we keep moving further into identifying based on our groups, I think that we're doing a disservice to his message, which I think was very powerful and that united the country in many ways.
But not at the time. In Martin Luther King's time, white folks hated him. It causes me to bristle and have an emotional reaction whenever somebody says, black people are killing folks 50% in violent crimes, and then says Martin Luther King united the country. Martin Luther King would be down for Black Lives Matter.
Facts. Martin Luther King would be down for Black Lives Matter. And I love when conservatives like to use Martin Luther King because there's a massive contradiction with this. There's a massive contradiction with it, especially now when like Trump is trying to roll back on policies that Martin Luther King fought to build on Martin Luther King Day. It's just weird to hear that. But the guy, 50% of crime, like those statistics are way off anyway. I'll cut those statistics to piss, and you could try me in the comment section if you want to. But like he's trying to say 50% of crime, then bringing up Martin Luther King as if Martin Luther King were trying to unite us all together and things like that. And he was trying to bring a society together where we were more integrated because he thought blacks could get more resources from those societies, from those areas. But again, look, we're going away from the whole conversation of policing every time this guy jumps in the conversation. And that's the thing, like, I can't stand about conservatives. Like, we're going so far away from the conversation right now. How do law enforcement interact better with black people? How do they interact better with any minority? How do black people interact better with law enforcement? The topic was police should be given more resources. What are you talking about? What does Martin Luther King have to do with this? Do police need more resources in order to be effective? Two solutions came up. One yes, and one yes, and another was police should come from the community that they're policing. That's a solution. This guy came up with a problem to the solution. Anyway, let's keep going.
The next statement is, I believe that all lives matter.
It's a little bit surprising. Below all of this stuff, below skin, deeper than all this, there is a intrinsic God-given life that's put inside of all of us. I think that it's concerning that any movement would reject the fundamental premise of that while preaching for equality.
Exactly.
At that point, you're really not an equality movement if you're really only interested in speaking to your specific group.
I truly believe, and I agree with everything that you say. Everyone deserves life, and I believe that, life is a gift. Plain and simple, all life counts. Yeah. All life matters. All life deserves a chance.
Yeah, I think that especially in this platform, but also in the world and the country that we live in today, stating that all lives matter takes away from the inequality that's happening in the world. Of course, all lives matter.
It negates the fact that something has to be addressed. And if you don't address it and you don't recognize that there is a problem that has to be changed, then you never fucking change it.
But that's not our intention. Our intention was just to answer a simple question.
But it's not.
Right.
Not everything is the same.
Question was
And not
framed
everything is the
as,
same.
do all lives matter?
Exactly.
If you ask me if all lives have intrinsic value, if all lives are valuable, if all lives are worthy, I would have said hell yes and would have been the first one in my chair. All lives matter is a specific phrase similar to Blue Lives Matter and anything else that mattered after Black lives were exclaimed to have mattered, to detract, to appropriate, to subvert the message and the framing and the narrative that's being brought to us by the Black Lives Matter movement. So I don't think anybody here in this room thinks that any life is less worthy than another's. But the phrase all lives matter was derived from Black Lives Matter to subvert Black Lives Matter, and I won't come here and sit down and say that that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we're just kind of going into the weeds here. The question wasn't Black Lives Matter. It's a simple question. Do you believe that all lives matter?
I don't think that's an interesting phrase.
Connotations.
Is that a phrase that you've used quite frequently before?
I think, not really. I think that you can attach
Right,
whatever
because
you
it
want to
started
it.
right
And
after
that's the thing, is I
Black
try and
Lives
step back from, whatever sort of identity, political stuff we have going on, and I try and deal with things head on based on reality. When someone says to me, do you think all lives matter? I answer unequivocally yes every time. The same way if you ask me if Black Lives Matter or female lives matter, I will answer the same way.
Do Black lives matter?
Yes, they do.
This guy, okay, so this guy is an extensive he is a complete contradiction, right? So he said he tries to step back and say like, oh, the term all lives matter, right? The term all lives matter, right? Is just overall what the question was, and I'm answering that question that all lives matter, right? Interesting enough, right? Interesting enough, like at the beginning when he sat down, what was the first thing he said when he sat down? The first thing he said when he sat down was that a political movement if a political movement is only speaking to their specific group, that's completely basically like I'm paraphrasing what he said, but basically he was saying that that's wrong for them to think that way. It's wrong for them to only think about their political movement. Black Lives Matter was not saying that other groups don't matter. It was saying that Black Lives Matter too. That's all it was saying. Black Lives Matter too, and the society and we need to figure out a way in society to make Black lives seem to matter more. That's all it was saying. But he said when he tried to step back from his political movement. And that's what I really don't like about conservatives or very far left liberals. Like, I feel like both sides do this. Like, they deflect when the points don't hit where they want it to go. And they go away from the point so often. And that's exactly what he's been doing the entire time. That was the only point of this whole entire conversation. He actually stayed on the point. If you think about it, it was the only point in the conversation where he stayed on the point. But let's keep going. This is a great conversation.
I had conflicting feelings about coming here today.
Okay.
For me, I was conflicted because I don't feel like I should speak for Black oppression, but as a white woman, I think that I can be of value to other white people who may not understand. I'm Sandra Cruz. Well, I'm from the 60s, and I went to jail a lot for fighting for women's rights. And as a human being, I think it's important that I speak out and speak up for injustices.
I'm feeling conflicted now as someone who steps into the law enforcement side as if we are on opposite sides. I am a law enforcement officer and a Black Lives Matter supporter. I find myself searching for what to do and how to make a difference, and I've had moments of thinking about leaving the force. I finally had a realization that this gives me an opportunity to have a different angle as a white woman and also as a police officer to potentially make a difference, even if it's just with changing myself.
I didn't hesitate. I've been a civilian my entire life, and I consider it an honor to have an opportunity to provide voice for law enforcement and the men and women that serve our communities. I think it's fundamentally important for society to respect law enforcement. Men and women that serve our communities with tremendous honor and distinction end up getting a bad rap. I think that that's very harmful.
I think that it is important. I think it's imperative to speak whenever you have an opportunity to. And I think that all of us in whatever movements we're part of or whatever belief systems we're part of should use our gifts.
I agree with him. I agree with the comment he made. My heart goes out to her, like it really does, because it is a conflicting area, because I don't think that Black people see officers as the enemies. Rational Black people, okay? I'll say rational, right? Don't see officers as the enemies. We just want more respect when it comes from that side of the life, right? When it comes to that side, and it is a white and black thing. That's what it all comes down to. It's years and years of systematic things that have been put in place, and not just the systematic things that have been put in place, but these ideologies that have existed amongst both groups that cause to these conflicting conversations that happen when it comes to law enforcement and Black people, and it's definitely something that we need to discuss and talk about. But I like how we have officers like her, officers like her out there that are willing to look at the perspective from the other side, but also I like that we have people like him who are from the other perspective, but is also listening to what she has to say and is taking it into consideration. Like, she's scared when she's out there as an officer, and we need to find a way to make it more comfortable for our officers too. We should respect our officers. I definitely agree with the other guy on that. We should respect police officers and people in our community that serve our community, but the servers of the community should also respect the community as well. Let's keep going.
De-escalation training is sitting in a room like this with a PowerPoint and walking officers through scenarios, and nothing in a scenario is ever going to be like the real world. In defense of officers, only those of us that walk in the shoes of having a badge and a gun and being in these high stress situations can really articulate what it's like to make these split-second decisions. With our training, officers need to be in these types of discussions, owning their shit and being like, I did this wrong and I have this prejudice, and how can I sit with people who can teach me and change me?
This is what I think is sort of dangerous about a conversation like this, is that really the only thing that I want law enforcement being trained on is the law. Okay, this nebulous conversation about thinking about how I think about things, and
Some of us in law enforcement think of ourselves as social workers with a gun.
and that's concerning because your job is to enforce the law.
As someone in the field who wants more de-escalation training, it's not because I don't believe in a lot of the laws that I enforce, and it is my job to enforce the law. I'm not a law warning officer. That's not what I signed up to do. But we are given the discretion to make choices. And that's why we need more training, because we're human beings, just in my perspective. And I appreciate your support of law enforcement and your perspective.
Yeah, and I appreciate your perspective as well as your real service that you've done. So, and I don't want to, our disagreements certainly don't take away from my respect and admiration for your service.
Well, thank you
I
for
think
your
we
support.
all respect the service of everyone who works to the service of others. I don't think anybody in this room is against individual officers. The conversation is to take a step back and recognize that this institution is a relic of Anglo policing from European culture, but also slave catching and deep-rooted racism in American policy. And we need to take that step back and recenter this conversation on the fact that it's bigger than just an officer.
I think part of the problem is that we're still so segregated. Where do we go to have these conversations? Where do we go to learn from each other, to break down the stereotypes? It's systemic, and I'm so thrilled that there's a Black Lives Matter movement. It's really exciting.
Guys, thank you so much. I know this hasn't been an easy one, but I appreciate your...
Okay, cool. Cool. Yeah, I agree 100% with what she, like, we are very segregated as a society, and we definitely need to find ways to pull ourselves together in order to have these type of conversations, in order to make the conversation go forward, because I don't believe not discussing this is not going to make it go on. I know people always hit me with the Morgan Freeman quote, like, we'll stop talking about it. No, we didn't talk about it in the 1960s, and that's why it's as bad as it is today. And I do think it's de-escalating over the years. I do think, like, we're finding ways to come together, and, like, I think, like, eventually we'll get to a certain point, but that conversation was great, and we definitely need to find places where we can have those conversations. Law enforcement amongst the black community, all kinds of stuff like this. I like Jubilee for that reason. Jubilee definitely opens up the door for everybody to be able to have a dialogue about things that they disagree with and bring them together and talk about these things. And as you can see, nobody in the room had animosity towards each other. Nobody hated anybody. Even the white guy had a strong opinion, but at the same time, it's respected because I understand he comes from a different environment than other people do. He doesn't understand the black struggle, right? But I hope that he's willing to come and, like, listen to, you know, the black struggle, as well as black people are willing to listen to his side of the story too. He has a respect for law enforcement that we don't understand, because in our community, we don't seem to respect law enforcement because of how they treat us. But he has a respect for law enforcement that is from what he's taught in his life. And that's a good thing too. That's not a bad thing. Conservatives aren't bad, just as well as liberals aren't bad. So we need to have these conversations more. Anyways, though, that's it, y'all. I'm out.